Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 17th episode of the PixelPlay Podcast, your weekly podcast where we get together to talk about anything related to video games and the news within it. I'm one of your hosts, Kaylan, aka Ktastrophy, joined as always by my co-host, Adam, CSRadical. In this week's episode, we are going to be talking about Halo Infinite and the development issues that it might be experiencing. We're going to be talking about Activision and the loss of almost 30% of its player base. We're going to be talking about a possible delay of PS5 units all the way up until 2022, and we'll be talking about music being replaced by video games as the most popular identifier for youth culture. Once again, I'm your host, Kaylan, aka Ktastrophy. This is the PixelPlay Podcast. If it's your first time here, welcome. We hope you enjoy the show. If you're one of our regulars, thank you so much for sticking around. You can always find us at PixelPlaycast on Anchor, Spotify. We are also on Twitter at PixelPlaycast as well as Instagram. If you want to be part of the show, you can email us at pixelplaypodcast@gmail.com. We're happy to read your emails on the show and answer any questions. Adam, first thing I want to ask you, how are you doing?
Doing horrible. Why are we here?
What's going on?
What is life? What is a man? Yeah. A miserable Oh shit! No, we're sorry. I got a little too off track there. It's going to be that kind of episode, isn't it? Woo! I was already. We're not even a minute in. I'm already delving into Castlevania quotes. Holy crap! Okay. Got to calm it down a little bit. Other than that, though, I guess I'm doing okay. Fine. I'll admit that I'm doing fine. I guess.
As best as you can in these circumstances.
You
right?
try anyway. Yeah.
It's been at least sunny, which is a huge change for us, at least.
Hey, it's actually going to be not cold either, which is going to be also nice, considering it's mid-May now.
Yeah, weather's just weird now.
It's just Canada. It's just Canada.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's not like we're going out anyways, so what does it matter? Adam, what have you been playing lately? We haven't really talked about that.
I've dabbled in a few things here and there. I'm still messing with Final Fantasy 14 as my just base. I'm gonna just play with a podcast on the background game.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that, I tried out Wreckfest, which was that Demolition Derby racer that was free this month on PS5. That one was okay, nice and chill. Even cool. With the well, I guess you can only be so much chill when you're having a demo derby with lawnmowers, So you try to be as chill as you can, but you ultimately fail because you go flying because it's a lawnmower.
Yeah.
But no, other than that, just kind of sticking to the same old. Just waiting for Mass Effect on Friday. I'm not streaming that for probably
How
all
excited
day.
Are you about that?
Depends. It depends.
What do you mean by that?
I don't want to play through the original trilogy again and suddenly realize, oh god, the nostalgia is way too strong and it's not nearly as good as I remember it because I have so many bad memories from Andromeda that I feel like it's going to carry into the trilogy.
You've got an out. Is that if it doesn't turn out well, you just say, well, it's not the old games. It's
I'm
just the
damaged goods. I can't help it.
No, it's the remaster. It's the remaster that damaged it. The game is just as good as you remember. It's the
I'm gonna say if it's the remaster that's wrong, they have to really royally screw this up because apparently they're making all the shitty things about 1 more like 2, which is the good one. So it's
And you said you're gonna be streaming. You're gonna be streaming that?
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be at least streaming. Yeah, that'll probably be my stream game for a while, unless I find something else that tickles my fancy. But I don't know how you over tickle someone's fancy when you have literally banging aliens and shooting aliens and talking about aliens and then talking about banging and shooting aliens.
You're living Captain Kirk's fantasy, really.
Well, apart from honestly, side note on my side podcast, the VCR podcast, which is also on my YouTube channel. There's my quick little plug.
Go. Plug of the week.
We talked about because we were talking about Star Wars because it was May the 4th, but we of course naturally Star Trek's so close to the other, you always end up talking about it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about what Star Trek games might look like if they were to do them properly, especially in a AAA format. And I said honestly, the only way that I think it could make any sense is if you did outside, you could be on the Enterprise, but you would be playing a red shirt or something like that in a Mass Effect style setting. In terms of third-person shooter action RPG. Because I find that Star Trek, unlike Star Wars, tends to be a little more not one-dimensional, but very pinpoint in the few kinds of games I think you could make for it. I don't think you can do a lot with Star Trek in the way that Star Wars is very moldable. Because I don't think you can do much beyond say an MMO, the flight simulator stuff that we see, and then maybe a shooter. You can't really go beyond that, whereas Star Wars has a little more to it, I think.
I'm going to throw one out there for you. like a Telltale Star Wars or Star Trek game, I think that would have a lot of potential.
Yeah, that's also true as well.
Yeah. So, but I know what you mean. Yeah, you're kind of limited.
But if we're talking AAA, I probably think you'd have to do something akin to Mass Effect to be able to like really get the most out of it.
Yeah, do like an RPG kind of thing. I think you're right.
Because I mean, the other part that it works with Mass Effect is that because, well, what's the biggest thing about Star Trek? Is it the action? No, it's the diplomacy, and that's what a lot of BioWare games tend to be. It's all about you talking your way through everything.
Yeah.
Or talking your way in everybody's bedroom, one or the other. Actually, both. Let's go both.
It could be both. Why not both?
You can you literally in the first game. I'm sorry, this is not a spoiler for Mass Effect 1 anymore. You can literally talk the final boss into shooting himself, so you don't have to face the final boss. So
yeah, it's always really cool when video games kind of have that creativity that you can do that.
Well, it's like every D&D player's dream, just to be like, let me diplomacy my way out of this.
Yeah, it was funny bringing up D&D. I had a character who was very high charisma. And he just ended up talking everyone into doing like ridiculous stuff. We had at one point we were like meeting up with like some lieutenant of the big baddie, and I convinced him to join our team to go like raid a dungeon. And then in that dungeon, I then convinced other people to betray him for us. And like it was just a mess, and I just ended up betraying everybody. It was kind of funny. So yeah, Adam, we got a little off topic here, but talking about games that are hypotheticals, maybe one day might come out. I wanted to shift over to Halo Infinite. So Sean Murray at The Gamer was released an article talking about production within Halo Infinite and how it's slightly problematic in the sense that they are dealing with crunch and they're having to redesign the game several times. So Sean writes, I'm just trying to pull it up here. So back in 2019, 343 Industries, Bonnie Ross told the Academy of Interactive Arts and Science that Halo Infinite's development was slow and deliberate in order to avoid creating the same sort of crunch conditions that produced Halo 4 and Halo 5. Now we're finding out that despite the delay, Halo Infinite's development is being just as crunchy as its predecessors. And this is also to mention that Halo basically was supposed to be out around the time the Xbox came out.
It was supposed to be launched.
It was delayed for a year, so I mean they've had some runway. But he continues. That's according to Reset Era user translating a video on Chinese social media site Bilibili. I'm not familiar with it. From someone claiming to have worked at 343 Industries. He goes on to further say, additionally, the former 343 employee talked about the disastrous demo from last summer that led to Halo Infinite's extended delay into 2021. He called company executives overly ambitious in wanting to create both a new game engine and a semi-open world game at the same time. This meant that resources were constantly being swapped back and forth as engine defects were discovered and needed to be corrected. The engine itself can largely be blamed for Halo Infinite's poor demo performance last year, and the engine hadn't been fully completed yet. Lots of content was cut from the single player and multiplayer games in order to get the game content complete back in January. In fact, I think it's a finished product will be great. The story is a big improvement and the gameplay is much richer, though the development cycle is too long. Don't expect to be an epoch-making masterpiece. Adam, is Halo Infinite in trouble?
I think the answer to that question was already made when it didn't make launch. Okay. Now the question is more, how much in trouble is Halo Infinite going to be? I think the answer is the longer that this takes, the more I think people should be worried. And I know a lot of people sit back and be like, well, if they're taking extra time to get stuff done, that should be a good thing, right? It should in theory, but we are not talking, a random indie studio. We're not talking like an outside third-party publisher. We're talking Microsoft and its flagship. Yeah. This is something that that they've been planning for a while. This is something that they wanted to get out there as soon as possible. And not only is it falling behind, but it seems like they're doing extra work, which honestly, I've started to realize that when things are getting crunched, that usually means they're not close to launch. It usually means they're way behind or something's gone horribly wrong.
Yeah, I don't think, for me, I'm in the same boat. I think there is some reason to be concerned with Halo Infinite. I don't think crunch is necessarily an indication that a game is going to be bad. It is an unfortunate aspect of the industry, but I mean, there's crunch in any project before you get it done. I think the issue here is that they had such a long like they extended it for a year. So it sounds like there was a lot of problems at the beginning if they were going to extend it for a year and they're still having to do crunch. Like I think back to The Last of Us, and that game got delayed after delay after delay, and look how much better it came. Uh, but I think there's a difference between, hey, we have a finished product and we just need to fine tune it, and what I'm hearing here is sounds like there's fundamental issues that they've had to fix, and it's taking longer than they had anticipated. So it doesn't sound like the game that was going to launch was in a good position. The fact that they say, they're building a new engine in a semi-open world environment, like those are two big changes for a franchise, and there's a learning aspect to either one of those. And the fact that you're now having a 1 year delay and a crunch, it's kind of not a good sign for the game.
Yeah, and it doesn't help too that, like you said, they're doing a system that's completely different from what Halo's known to be for. I mean, granted, like it's not like Halo's new to, or Halo. Yeah, sorry, my brain is all over the place right now. It's not like Halo has never had large levels, but the difference is now this is one massive map, and it seems like it shouldn't be too difficult when you really think about it because so many games do it now. But this is still a company that might have never had to engage in something like that before, and all the things they have to fine tune, like enemy spawns and weapon placements and all these things. So, not to mention any bugs that come out of open world games, because open world games have no history of ever being buggy as hell. Never.
Yeah.
It's not like we had a recent example where it literally got taken off of Sony source shelves and got a bunch of refunds for it. I was going to get Cyberpunk in there at some point. You know it. But it's not like there isn't a history of it. I mean, think of any Assassin's Creed game. Just all these kinds of games are just rife with bugs. And when you are making a game that is no longer a linear, like even if the level is really wide open, it's still linear in the fact of where you got to go. Now, all of a sudden, the developers are having to account for all these different decisions that a player is going to make that is not unlike what they would do if you put them in this level and just say, okay, here's your objective. At some point, you got to go there. Mm-hmm. Now, the game is like, well, I mean, you can do whatever you want. I mean, there's this thing here, there's this thing here, there's that thing there, and there's 20,000 other things you can do. And they'll be like, okay, but I want to do this, but I want to get to that to get to do this. And they're like, oh, shit, we didn't account for that.
Yeah.
So when you hear crunch, and I guess it depends, because you're right. Last of Us Part 2 got a lot of flack for crunch too with Naughty Dog. And it obviously turned out to be, to most people, the masterpiece that, a lot of people hoped it was going to be.
You know what? Regardless of like what you thought of the game, like you have to recognize like this like not the skill or success, but you have to respect what it is. Like whether you like the game or not, it is a successful.
I mean, it's the fact that enough people decided to say that it was, and it sold really well. So I mean, despite what anybody says about any game, if it sells well, it's gonna like. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and say Fortnite is a piece of shit. I may not like it, but I mean, look how many people play it. So clearly it's doing something right. Mm-hmm. And with Last of Us Part 2, it just comes down to, I think, the difference between this and Halo Infinite is that Last of Us 2 wasn't seeking to reinvent itself. It just seems like it was perfecting it. Mm-hmm. Whereas Halo Infinite seems like a completely different step.
Yeah.
And I think that's what doesn't help. It's probably the same reason of why Cyberpunk had a lot of issues. Final Fantasy 15 had a big problem with that, where literally the game had to get made again in 2 years because just it kept falling behind, and they eventually said, we got to put something out. And they did so many different ideas about it that didn't work out. Same would go for, I can't believe I just had it on the tip of my tongue and I blanked on it. Mass Effect Andromeda, same deal. Trying to do something completely different. It was supposed to be procedurally generated worlds, and that didn't work out. And obviously they had to crunch really fast there too. I think when I meant to say like crunch seems to be a bad sign, it's usually when it's a game doing something different from its predecessor.
Yeah.
Because any example that I've ever seen of that, to my memory, has always resulted in a bad product coming out. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Halo Infinite's going to be a bad product, but I think my worry now is it's not going to be what I think a lot of people are hoping it's going to be. And especially because they're waiting longer for it, it's only going to compound how disappointing that's going to feel when it ends up being, I don't know, a 7.5 to an 8, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the issue is that a lot of people are banking and waiting because there hasn't been a huge Xbox, exclusive. And so a lot of people, I think,
even think there has been one if you're not counting like re-releases or like driving games, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, like there hasn't been like the exclusive. Like there's been next gen games, but not that exclusive. And so I think there's a lot riding on Halo, and I think people are going to be disappointed. Like the fact that we haven't seen anything either since they've gone into, like, have we seen anything else? since. Like, I think they had that bad demo and then they went back underground, and I'm surprised that they haven't kind of resurfaced and been like, hey, look, here's where the game is. Like, we're improving on it. So
Yeah, no, it's been not great.
So what do you think this means for Xbox if, Halo kind of falls flat?
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, how many games have failed and then people come back and keep playing it? I mean, I'm a Final Fantasy fan. I'm still going to take a look at 16. I haven't liked a Final Fantasy game since, I don't know, 10, 10-2. I mean, I'm okay with 12, but I think the core will always be there. And if you're an Xbox gamer, you're always looking forward to a Halo game because you have to. It's like the big thing. It's like now Gears of War is similar to that. Like, how many Gears of War games do we need? But people are going to have to be excited about a Gear 6 because at this point, apart from whatever's third party, like exclusive wise, there isn't much. I mean, let's be honest, like Fable's a thing that I know people are excited about, but if you go back and play the 3 games, like they're not amazing. They're okay, but they're not like shining stars. But again, because Xbox has that underwhelming exclusive market, unlike Sony, who, and I'm not trying to be a fanboy here, but Sony's clearly got the exclusives that are at the highest of octane. It's you kind of, if you're an Xbox owner and solely an Xbox owner, you kind of have to, accept if maybe Halo Infinite doesn't end up being remotely as good as you want it to, that, okay, well, that's the one bad one. I'll just have to look forward to the next thing they do because hopefully they'll learn the lesson there.
Yeah, I think there is a lot riding on Halo Infinite in that Sony has their brand of exclusives, and like those exclusives, whether you're into them or not, whether you like them or not, like you can't deny that, they're impressive and they are, everyone stops when Sony drops an exclusive. And so I think if Halo comes out and it's lackluster, I think that's a really bad look for Xbox, just in the fact that this is their largest flagship series and it's, not bad, but just mediocre or just good at best.
It just shows once again that like what Xbox Series X is right now is more a bang for your buck rather than a quality system. Because I mean, Sony already has them beaten the exclusive because they have the Demon's Souls remake. So they've already got one, and we're not even counting like, I guess, like things like Bugsnax and stuff that have managed to impress a little bit anyway. But I mean, Ratchet and Clank's going to be out very soon, and that could possibly really tip the scales again in their favor if it ends up being really well done. So Xbox not having really anything at this point, because I'm not royally keeping up with Xbox. Like, I'm not all over their stuff. But to my knowledge, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about anything coming out for it, I don't know what that next exclusive is right now on the docket. So they're kind of in this weird area where it's like, they're putting all this cool stuff on Game Pass right now, including mooching off a Sony property, no thanks to MLB deciding to make it so. But it's still like, okay, it's really cool that I can play these games like Outriders and MLB The Show right on day one on this really cheap subscription. But at some point, Microsoft has got to wow me with something beyond that. You can't just keep going, all right, here's this from this studio that, we gave some money to give us this availability for. It's like, okay, guys, but you got to show us what this console is worth. It can't just be like a Netflix gaming console because, as much as I'm sure a lot of people love that, it's not as easy to brag about. And I think that's what a core of the gaming audience likes to do. They like to say that our console's got the better games. And if Microsoft isn't even putting a hat into, or I guess something into the ring, like they're not even putting a competitor in, you're basically giving it to Sony or even Nintendo for that matter, just being like, see, we got the exclusives going, right?
Well, I think you open yourself up to a casual gaming market, and that's not necessarily a bad thing in doing that. But I think not having an exclusive, you don't have people like, you or I or even our listeners, like the people who are listening to podcasts about video games. Like, they're not going to say, they don't have a lot of exclusives, but I like the fact that I can get Game Pass and I can play, games that are a year or two older and get them for free. Like, the people who like the first adopters are going to be the ones who want that cutting edge brand new stuff. They're not going to wait for games to just kind of show up in a that are older. And I think Xbox needs to show that, PlayStation is not the only one that has these massive, blockbuster exclusives. And I think that's what's riding on Halo. Unless they start, firing on all cylinders with Bethesda and their games and such. Like, I think that's an issue that Xbox has. So
well, there is
I
the
think
rumor that
pressure is huge.
Starfield's going to show up. So
Yeah, I mean,
which
we'll
I
see.
keep sitting there and being like, look, if Starfield is coming out this year, why the hell haven't you announced that? The fact that we don't even know what Starfield is still in May, if it's coming out this year, that's a problem.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at what they did, what Bethesda did with the Fallout for, hey, it's June, it comes out in September, kind of E3 drop. But you have to remember that Fallout is a massive, well-known IP that you don't need to explain to people what Fallout is. But I think with something like Starfield, I don't know what Starfield is. I don't recognize Starfield. So for me, like you can say it and be like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but like you haven't generated that hype yet that you can with a franchise that is well known.
Not to mention that, like with the track record that Bethesda has, like, is a new IP something people are ready for from a company that can't even get their own core titles down right now?
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that you need to show me not only that, hey, Starfield is worth your time, but this game itself, like we've put the time in to make a solid game. Now, going back to one of our episodes, like I do think, Bethesda going, solo and becoming an exclusive will help them in that they can build an engine that works exclusively on one console. They don't have to balance it on a bunch. But yeah, I think Microsoft, if not Halo, they need to have something coming out soon to justify why you need to drop for an Xbox.
I mean, look, they're not in trouble. They're in no trouble. They got fuck you money. They're good. They can do whatever they want. The difference is whether or not you want this to be profitable. Because as we said before on the show, if it's just about Game Pass, you're not making money.
Yeah.
So if you really want to tip the scales, you got to have some good games. It can't just be a good deal. A good deal is great for so long until you have to stop making that deal.
Yeah, and I mean, no, I'm not trying to say that like Microsoft and Xbox itself is riding on Halo, but it's not going to drive consoles. Like, yeah, they have a war chest, but if you're not making money, you're losing money, basically.
Well, I could almost argue that they are banking on Halo because what else is coming?
Yeah. Well, this raises the question then. Is like, what was the plan? Like, let's assume that Halo came out when Xbox came out. What would they have had for the next year? Like,
oh, you could easily throw like extra content into that game. If it's open world, you could definitely do more. If we're talking game wise, though, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's an inconsequential argument right now to go on because we're dealing with a pandemic and everything's so behind. I'm pretty sure that we probably, like, if this was a non-pandemic 2020, 2021. I don't think we're having any of these conversations because all this stuff's on schedule, hopefully. So I God only knows like how many games that are going to probably not be out until next year would have been out either this year or late last year if everything was the way that it was supposed to be. It's so hard to tell.
That's a great point, and I'm going to bring in another one of our topics here. Let's talk about the PlayStation news that the shortage of consoles might go well into 2022. Because this is something that I want to kind of bring up. So Liam Wiseman at IGN says that he talks about a Bloomberg report that Sony spoke to a group of analysts about the supply constraints issues affecting PS5 supplies, reportedly warning that shortages will continue into 2022. They said, I don't think demand is calming down this year, and even if we secure a lot more devices and produce many more units of PlayStation 5 next year, our supply won't be able to catch up with that demand, Hiroki Totoki reportedly told the analysts. Essentially, it's been a global shortage of semiconductors, which are used in almost all computing devices, has made it increasingly difficult for the continuing demand for PS5 consoles to be met. Semiconductors are a crucial part of the PS5 architecture, and the shortages have led to delays in the console's production cycle. So both effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the trade war started with the Trump administration against China have also affected the ability for electronic manufacturers to get a hold of these parts. It was previously reported that AMD, which produces chips for the PS5, expected shortages to continue into 2021, but that looks to extend well into 2022 as well. And I don't think this is a PlayStation exclusive issue.
No, this is a tech problem.
This is a tech problem. So we could change this easily to PlayStation to Xbox, and I think both consoles are.
How we can change that to PC as well. Like it's really to everybody at this point. Unless you're a Nintendo Switch owner, because Nintendo short ships consoles anyway, so that's no different.
Nintendo is basically made of cardboard and like copper wire.
No. They straight up already intentionally keep their stock back. So it's no different. The difference between Nintendo and PS5 is that Nintendo means for there not to be a lot of stuff.
It's like that that meme, like where from, I think the movie is like, it's not RV. What's the one where like they go in an RV and pretend they're a family to like go smuggle drugs?
Oh God.
You know the meme I'm talking about where it's like, you guys are getting paid? Like, I feel like that's the meme.
I know
like,
exactly what you're talking about, and I can't
Sony's
for the life
like,
of me.
Sony's like, we can't fulfill stock, and Xbox is like, yeah, we can't get stock either, and like GPUs are like, yeah, we can't get stock, and Sony's like, or Nintendo's like, you guys are releasing stock?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this comes back to our question of, we're talking about the exclusives, and like, what do you think that this, like, if we think about the fact that there's fewer consoles out in the wild, what does this mean for, game publishers and developers? I mean, not so much developers, but publishers. If I'm sitting on this, next gen PS5 or Xbox game, do I release it when there's a shortage of PlayStations out there, or do I sit and wait on it?
Are you talking like just exclusive to that console?
No, I'm just saying, like, let's say in general, let's even think like Ubisoft is a bad example, but let's say, let's just, pull up, let's say Ubisoft, just for whatever's sake. Let's say the next Assassin's Creed is, they designed it to be exclusively on next gen consoles. And now we're having a situation where there's fewer in the ecosystem and there's therefore fewer buyers. Do you hold on to that game, or do you reschedule and like turn around and start building for previous generations? Like, what does this mean for the next generation of games, not necessarily game consoles?
If hypothetically you have a game that is supposed to be out at the end of this year and it was designed specifically for PS5 or Xbox Series X or whatever, you hold it back until the spring. Long enough to see what happens with at least like a good 6-month run of most of the world being at least well vaccinated, so that most stores are open. Because here's the thing that I think people are kind of forgetting and not really paying attention to, because we're all busy trying to get stock. They've actually shipped more PS5s, and I'm just using the PS5 example here. They've shipped more PS5s in the same amount of time than PS4s. So the reality is they've actually made more. The difference is the demand is higher, A, because there's more people on the fucking planet, and B, because gaming's a much bigger deal, and then C, because we're all sitting at home with nothing to do, so naturally we want it. So it's a lot easier to want it when you can't go outside and play baseball or any other sport, or go to restaurants every night or whatever, or spend your money elsewhere. There's nothing to do but be inside. So everybody wants a game console, because there's only so many series on Netflix you can binge before you're like, all right, I've seen it.
And I think that's another good point. Like, fewer of us are going out to restaurants. Like, we're not going away on trips or anything like that. So we have more income to spend on toys, like,
assuming you're working,
consoles.
If you're lucky.
I mean, yes. If there are some people who are, struggling and like, have lost their jobs, and that's unfortunate. But like, I would say generally, like, for most people, like, everyone's expenses are down. Whether your income is down too, I mean, there are people who are going through that. But regardless, I think across the board, most of us, our expenses have gone down, just because we're typically not driving anywhere, we're not going anywhere, we're not able to do anything. So
I mean, the hope is obviously too with, like, say, scalpers, because that's been the biggest issue this entire time for a lot of people. Now that at least in the States more and more stuff's opening, like, I've even heard that, like, New York plans to open by July 4th, like, completely open, not have to wear masks, which is insane to think about, that we're getting that some places are that close.
In Florida, they just never stopped.
Yeah, that's true. So there's going to be places where now stores are just going to be open and having stock. So scalpers are going to have a lot harder time to get stuff as well, which means more consoles are going to be actually available to people that, aren't going to be able to pay the proper price for it, not $1,500.
Yeah.
So that's an option as well. But when we get to the stock issue, like if we're talking games that are going to be cross-platform, you release that game. I don't give a shit. I don't care if your feelings a little bit hurt that you did the extra work for PS5 and there maybe won't be as many customers. In honest reality, there is more customers. So that's not even an issue business-wise. And if you're making it for cross-platform, it really doesn't matter. But if you are...
I would also argue, though, if you're making it for an exclusive, for like one console exclusive, I think you release it anyways. I think you can make a case that you can wait till like April just to see where everything is at, like just to see how much more stock there is. Unless like it's ready now, then screw you, put it out. But if you're intending to get it out in November, it's a couple more months. You don't even have to, like, we don't have anything dated. You could lie. You can just straight up say it's not ready yet. Yeah. See, I don't know. Like, I think if it is exclusive, you've probably got some handshakes and some money deals going back and forth across the table that, Xbox or PlayStation are expecting it to get released.
Well, let's throw the example of like Sony being first party with their exclusives. If you have Horizon ready in November, push it to April. Who cares?
No, because you need it. This is the problem that we're having with Xbox, is that there is nothing on the consoles to justify it. So I think you do need to have those exclusives. Send them out to die on the grapevine, just so that you can say, look at the library, look at the catalog that we have.
Well, I'm only flippantly saying delay it because it's not going to be the biggest factor whether you do or not. If you feel like you wanted to get it to more customers, then yeah, give it a few more months. Who cares? Because I mean, as gamers, there's so much more stuff out there. Not to mention, there will be other third-party games that will be released around the same time in the holidays. So you'll have plenty to work with. So I'm just talking in those very few cases. Like, we're talking the big ones. I'm not talking like, I don't know, like NHL 22. Who like release the damn game? Stop. But
I disagree. I think if you have something like Horizon, you send it out just so you can put another, flag on your hill to say, look at.
Oh, if I'm talking as a fan, give it to me and shoot it straight into my veins as soon as you can frickin' put it on the doorstep. I don't care. But I mean, as a business, like if you think it's worth it in the long term just to push it 4 to 6 months just to get a little bit more out of it, why not? If from a business perspective, do what you got to do to make the most money. As long as the game is still going to be amazing, I don't really care when it comes. Because I mean, I'm like, unless you're going to delay it 3 years, like, okay, we'll have a bit of an issue. But a few more months, I don't care. Like, I was perfectly happy not having a PS5 to this day, and I could still be patient for it. So, I mean, there's plenty of other else on the market that I can do. Not to mention, like I said, if we're talking a holiday release, there's so much else you can go and grab at the same time. Like, one game is not going to... Now, if everybody decides to push everything from November to March, maybe we're looking a little bit different, but that won't happen.
Well, that's a game of chicken, and if we all do that, then that happens. See, I was thinking more from the opposite. I was like, yeah, if it's a console exclusive, get it out so that you have that, thing that you can market, like, hey, get a PS5 so you can play Horizon Forbidden West or Halo Infinite or whatever. But I was thinking, yeah, if I was like a third party publisher, I would hold on to it. But you make a good point that if you are doing it on multi-platform, then it doesn't really matter. You're not going to feel that pinch because you will still have the Xbox and the PlayStation.
Well, yeah, it's not like PlayStation 4 has millions upon millions of consumers that can go buy that thing day one. So
no, but I was thinking more from the perspective of like, are we going to see more games maybe pivot who weren't planning on doing backwards compatible versions or last?
So you're talking like what God of War and Horizon 2 obviously as two examples did.
Yeah.
Probably. I think there would be unless like the game is completely dependent on the SSDs, like say a Ratchet is.
Yeah.
I think there are some games that you're going to be limited to otherwise, but I don't know. I think most of the games that are going to be specifically exclusive to these consoles, at this point, if you haven't made the decision already to do it, you probably can't.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think, like, any game that we know that isn't announced, they can just say it's for both consoles and they've just secretly been changing their minds behind scenes and we just don't know. I think if you've already announced it's console exclusive, and I don't think there really is that many to choose from at this point, so it's a hypothetical that I don't think really carries a lot because there isn't really much that qualifies. I think at this point, everybody, like, at least for the next, like, 12 months already, I think every publisher has made their decision on whether this is going to be multi-platform or not now because of the pandemic. I'd be pretty surprised if there's somebody being like, well, we were hoping to get this to 20 million PS5s in the winter, but I guess we're not going to be able to pull that off. So I guess we have to quickly downgrade this thing for PS4 as well. It's like, no, you figured this out by now because we've had 14 plus. Yeah, we're almost like a year and a half now of pandemic where you've had time to plan. So
yeah,
I think for the most part, it doesn't affect like most people. It might just affect like, I don't know, like maybe indie developers that are making PS5 or Xbox Series X exclusive content at this point.
Yeah. So we've been kind of dancing around this a little bit, and I just thought we could kind of just bring it up. I don't know if you're aware, but this week actually marks the 16th or not 16th, the 6th month anniversary of both consoles coming out. So I just thought real quick, I'd like to get your thoughts. What's your opinion of like the next gen? 6 months in, where do you sit?
It's a really difficult conversation to have because what can we really pull from? Like, when you really think about it, how much is there to pull from? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, and I said this a long time ago before these consoles came out, we're not going to notice visually nearly as much as we think we will. It's going to be faster. The load times are going to be better, but like, we're going to get so accustomed to that so quick that it's going to feel like normal gaming again. And that's kind of what it's already done to me. Like, sure, when I plopped an Astro's Player in for the first time and got the rumbles and all this stuff, it was cool. It's freaking cool. I'm playing, like I said, I played Wreckfest. If your car gets super damaged, it's now a little bit harder to pull the trigger. Like, stuff like that's noticeable, but realistically, when we're talking 60 frames, like, I'm used to 60 frames now. I'm used to the load times. Like, it all looks the same to me. So, without literally going out there and buying every exclusive that's on the market, I don't know if there's really a lot you can pull from apart from just, I guess, utter fanboyism. As a person that only owns a PS5, doesn't own an Xbox Series X, but knows somebody who has both. And, the opinion's very much the same. Like, none of us really have allegiances, so we're all in the same opinion that it's like, I mean, it's been cool. Like, it's nice having almost PC level, like, loading times and stuff, like, because you can dictate it with the SSDs now. But, I mean, we're 6 months in, and this is a pandemic year where almost nothing's been able to come out. I don't think we can even have that conversation fully until, like a good 6 to 12 months of not pandemic gaming years. Because we're so behind. Like, that's going to be the utter craziness when we get to, I don't know, like, say 2023, when we now have, like, a much bigger library and we're looking at all these games being like, we could have had you 12 months ago.
Yeah.
That's going to be the interesting thing. If we're talking 6 months right now, though, I mean, as a guy who owns a PS5, I didn't need it, and I said that from the very beginning when I got it. I didn't need it, but it was nice to have. And I say the same thing now, where it's like, yeah, it's cool to have, but I mean, I haven't sat there and be like, man, I couldn't live without this console. I could have easily been just playing PS4 this entire time and it wouldn't have bugged me.
Yeah, I'm of the same mindset. Like, so for me, I've got the same situation. I have the PS5, but like, we're both kind of keeping an eye of what's going on the other side of the fence with the Xbox. And yeah, I'm not regretting or upset with my decision to buy a PS5. I think it's great, and it's certainly a quality of life improvement. But I don't feel the compelling need of, oh my God, I need to go out and, like, you need to go out and buy a PS5 right now. Like, I'm thinking about the games that I've played on there, and it's been Miles Morales, which was cool. I mean, the neat thing there was like the ray tracing, and the load times were fast. And then I played Bugsnax, which was another one. But then it's been like a lot of, PS4 games that I've just been playing on upres. Oh, and I did play Assassin's Creed, which once again was great. Like, but it wasn't like, oh my God, this is something I couldn't have experienced on the PS4.
You could have just as easily played on the previous generation and been fine. And I think that's probably the biggest key. Like, obviously, like, if you're going for whichever console's doing better, I still think you give it to Xbox just for the deals. But I mean, it's not like it's not like there's a gap. Like, it's literally just, they're almost like right next to each other. It's just, what do you want? Yeah,
I think you raised a good point. And I think right now, if I had to say like which one's doing a better job, I mean, they're both kind of doing like mediocre.
I wouldn't even say they're doing a job. I think they're just there. Like, they're just standing there, just kind of waiting, like the tumbleweeds passing by at this point.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I think about it like PlayStation does have some exclusives, but not enough to say like, yeah, you need this.
I mean, once Ratchet comes out, at least they have like a couple you can come up with now. But realistically speaking, like, I'm not even going to go there and say which console's really better between the two. My thing would just be like, I wouldn't suggest either at this point because it seems kind of pointless. It's just a money sink. Like, if we're talking the average person who might struggle to throw like $600-700 together right now, I'd say hold off. There's no reason to get one. But if you have the money to spend for it, then go ahead. Like, I'm not going to stop you.
Yeah, but if you want to stimulate the economy, definitely, go out and buy it, but it is not necessary at this point.
Yeah, no, it's literally it's a luxury buy if I'm really just being honest here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, is the improvements amazing? Like, yeah, I love the SSD. Now, as a guy who has both an SSD in his PCs, actually, I just upgraded my laptop too, my 9-year-old laptop, and now it's running so much better now, which tells you just what an SSD is friggin' good for.
Living that solid state life.
Just having all of these things now, like, sure, the speed is amazing. I really love the fact now that I don't have to wait 2 minutes for my freaking PlayStation to boot up anymore. But I mean, it's all little quality of life things. There's nothing that's making me go like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. This isn't like a transition from NES to SNES or to PlayStation for the first time. Like, this is all just minor stuff that will compound in the same way that, like, death by 1,000 cuts will always hit you, but this is the opposite. This is like 1,000 band-aids healing a lot of old wounds that you've had from previous generations of gaming. But like, there's nothing that's sitting here coming from like the heavens above and the light shining above it being like, this is the future. We're not there yet. Like, we're still probably a couple years away from really seeing what these generations are capable of. Obviously, we saw the story today about what PlayStation's new Oh my god, VR system's going to be like with 4K and like some of the features that it's going to have. So it seems like the future could be upon us in a couple more years. But as it is, at 6 months, like there's not a whole lot to really dig into yet.
Yeah. Speaking of digging into, Bree Royce at Massively Overpowered did a deep dive into Activision Blizzard, and you might be interested to hear how it's going. And I know you're just chomping at the bit to jump on this one. So Bree Royce at Massively Overpowered wrote, is basically, saying that they did a quarterly report to their investors, and what came out was kind of interesting. So they have the results for Q1, and surprisingly, they're actually doing very well. With revenues in 2.28 billion, a significant increase compared to its quarter last year. Though, of course, this quarter's last year wasn't great to begin with. Once again, the moneymakers are. Can you guess what the moneymakers are, or do you know this already? What do you think would be making the most money for Activision
Blizzard? There couldn't be some ridiculously high hard drive space taking up Call of Duty game that's doing really well.
That's one of them. Can you guess what the other two are?
Oh, I'm sure World of Warcraft would be one.
That's number 2. Number 3, what would you guess?
What could be the last one? Probably Overwatch still.
Nope. Candy Crush.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So anyways,
stupid casuals.
So like I said, they're doing very well in terms of their finances. However, one of the key things that came out was that Blizzard has apparently been losing a big significant amount of their users. So they wrote, as we noted last month, Blizzard continues to lose monthly active users across all of its titles. It's now lost 11 million players in the last 3 years, or about 29% as measured by Blizzard's own preferred monthly active user count. 2 million of those dried up just last quarter in Q 2044. Yeah, and so they say in Q1 of 2018 they had 38 million monthly active players. Is that the term? Yeah. And then in Q 2021, this quarter they went down to 27 million. So Adam, what do you think this is? Is this a matter of just Blizzard's games getting kind of old and stale and people moving on to something else, or are there some holes in the ship at Activision Blizzard?
There are two major reasons why Activision Blizzard is maybe still making a lot of money, because gamers are friggin' utter idiots when it comes to spending money on the things they love too much. And I should know, because I totally don't engage in such practices ever. One of the reasons, honestly, is that people are just sick and tired of Activision Blizzard. They're just tired of their crap. Like, Bobby Kotick has created such a horrible image to that company, in the same way that EA has done, in the same way that Ubisoft has done. And I think a lot of people are finally at that point, and obviously with the way the pandemic's been and all these political issues that have come up, and we're now getting used to being like a big community that gets together and fights stuff that we don't like. Gaming is translating into the same thing too. A lot of people, I know a lot of people that straight up, myself included, have refused to buy from EA, have refused to buy from Activision, and have refused to buy from Ubisoft right now. And I've stuck to those three, and I think Bethesda falls into that category too. Now I can't, so I don't know what I'm going to do. But that's one of them. It's just the fact that people just cannot stand this company right now, because I actually think they might be more hated right now than EA, just because EA is quietly just kind of backed away a little bit since Battlefront 2 specifically. Mm-hmm. The other half of the problem is that when you really sit down and think about it, Activision Blizzard has two properties that are really moving at this point. Here's the list of all the games released from them since 2017, so about a 5-year span. Skylanders, which is dead. Crash Bandicoot, which was just a remake. Destiny 2, which is, I'm surprised is not getting close to announcing Destiny 3 yet, because you kind of got to figure that thing's going to run its way out soon. Call of Duty game. Another Crash. Oh, I think it's the same thing. I think it was just another re-release. Another Call of Duty game. Spyro remake. Okay, that's fine. Sekiro. Doesn't even really belong to them, so I don't feel like it counts. Crash Team Racing. Basically another redo. Spyro again. Redo. Call of Duty again. Okay, that's all from 2017 to 2019. 2020, Call of Duty, Tony Hawk, Crash. That's it. So that's Activision. It's Call of Duty, 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 and sometimes a Crash game. That's really it. So unless you're a big Call of Duty fan, which by the way, most people, if you're older, like my age, you've burnt out of that series. It's been going on so long. Most people have been burned out. The people playing these games religiously now are a lot younger. So
or like streamers, like,
yeah,
you know.
So you're not getting the same crowd that, like, I mean, I think they're probably getting bigger numbers anyway, but that's just because, you know, there's more people playing and it's just gaming's a bigger industry now. But there's clearly a fatigue level from that. And then with Bethesda, it's even worse. It's literally Overwatch, and that's been it.
You mean Blizzard?
Like, sorry, Blizzard.
You said Bethesda.
Oh, that's my bad. Yeah, but Blizzard, it's basically Overwatch and then updates to WoW. Like, that's literally all they've done for a while now. Because Diablo Immortal still isn't out. Diablo 4 is kind of in the ether. Overwatch 2 is kind of in the ether. There's nothing coming out of Blizzard. So, I think it's less that it's old, just they're done. Like, there's nothing to do. Like, there's not much else you can go with. In the same vein that, like, if you play an MMORPG like WoW, like, yeah, you can go back and play it, but eventually you're going to have finished everything. You'll probably have gotten all the loot that you really want, and now you're just waiting.
Yeah.
And I think people are kind of tired of waiting.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think it is just a matter, like, I think, one, they're struggling with, you know, a publicity issue. I mean, they had that issue with the Hong Kong protests and banning some of their, you know, key players within, I think it was Overwatch that it was. Was it Overwatch? Yeah,
it was Overwatch.
And so, you know, they're not doing well in terms of a publicity standpoint, which I think does hurt it. But I think you're also having a situation where, you know, people are getting tired of these games, which, you know, they are, you know, long-term like MMORPGs or things that you return to, like Overwatch, but those do get stale, and it'd be interesting to see, like, what do you think is going to happen once we see Overwatch 2 or once we see, you know, Diablo come out again? Like, do we see these numbers go back up? Or
I'm going to go out there and say Overwatch 2 is going to bomb.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm not meaning like no one's going to play. It's not going to be like, I don't know, like...
It's not going to be a failure, but it's not going to do as well.
It's not going to do what I think what Bethesda, or no, did it again. It's not going to do what Blizzard wants it to do. I don't think they're going to get remotely as much because I think people have moved on. Like, people will come back, they'll peek in, but I don't think you'll be seeing people playing that game for years like they did with Overwatch.
Well, I think it's one of those games that it's one of those series that, you know, you get a casual group, but they eventually, you know, fade away, and then you just get into the point where it. And then I feel like this is the problem with most like online games, is that you get a core group who dominate and become experts in the game, and then it's just unapproachable for someone to kind of come in and like new and see what it is. I think this is one of the issues that you have with something like Rainbow Six, even, where you've got a super highly competitive, you know, player base now that it makes it almost inaccessible for someone to just come in and get their feet wet without getting completely destroyed. So, and I think when Overwatch 2 comes out, like, the hero shooter genre has kind of, you know, had its time and kind of dissipated, I think. What do you think about that?
I don't think it's dissipated because I keep saying Battle Royale is going to be on its way out and it doesn't go away. I think there's some things that just won't. But in the fact with
I don't think
as
a genre it's going to I don't think as a genre it's going to disappear. I mean, there's always going to be someone who wants to play a hero shooter, but I think that whole everybody's playing one right now is kind of dissipated.
Well, I think that would also just be largely because there's always a new trend every 6 months, and that's what everybody gravitates towards. I mean, I don't think you're going to see, you know, a long-term. There are some games that'll stick long-term, but like every time we think there's one that's going to be like the next like Fortnite, it dies and goes away. Like Apex is nowhere near what it used to be when it first came out. Like, I know a lot of people still play it, but it's not what it was. And the same goes for Overwatch. The same went for Fall Guys, and everybody thought that was going to be a big one. Like, it seems like only a couple hang in there, and Fortnite and Warzone seem to be the two right now. Yeah. And everything else just kind of falls back to the wayside. And, you know, with Activision Blizzard right now, it's going to come down to a big part of they're not releasing enough to get people to be interested in their brand anymore. You know, I even took a look at Ubisoft just for fun. Just in the last 2 years alone, I think they've released more games than Activision Blizzard as a whole did. And that's because they invest heavily into the indie market too. They're not just a one-trick pony. And I think that's what Activision's kind of falling into, is Activision's the Call of Duty guys and Blizzard's the World of Warcraft guys. And that's all they got. Granted, there's Overwatch 2, there might be Diablo, but you're talking, 4 or 5 properties, and that's it. Ubisoft has 4 or 5 properties you can name off the bat, plus their indie stuff, plus the other stuff they kind of surprise you with. So
It's interesting because I mean there is more to it. Like the Spyro games or not Spyro, the Crash Bandicoot games did do surprisingly well. And they were received really well. Same with Sekiro, like that did really well.
But if I
and those
asked you who published that game, would you remember?
No, I wouldn't. But that
that's the problem. Is like,
but that doesn't really matter to Activision. They just want the money and the game and the players.
Well, yeah, but their big cash cows are not going to be Crash. It's going to be Call of Duty and World of Warcraft and those games. And back to what I said, it's people are getting A, pissed off with them, and B, just getting like just completely killed off in these games. Like they're done. They're burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it seems like the gaming market is very fickle now, and like, what is going to be the next game to take over Fortnite, which is dominating basically the whole conversation? And I mean, basically,
you can say nothing because that's literally what people have been trying to do with World of Warcraft for like 15 years. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just can't beat it. All you can do is just try to complement it. You can try to be something on the side that just, and that's what Final Fantasy 14 did right. Well, actually, I should say the second time because they fucked up the first one.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 14, I don't think ever went in trying to beat WoW. I think they went trying to be the alternate.
Yeah.
Because so many games tried. Like Guild Wars 2 tried. Elder Scrolls Online tried to. Star Wars The Old Republic tried to. Star Trek Online tried. Like, there's so many games out there that really try to take a run at them. And it just, you can't. Whereas you try to create your own niche. And I think that's why some games are doing better than others right now, because they're just going, okay, I know what I'm good at. Well, let's try to carve out our own thing. The only way that you can honestly beat a game like Fortnite is with a license like Call of Duty. Like, that's literally the only way that could have ever been possible. That's why both of them have their own universes now, because literally Activision has so much money that they can pour into that, and Call of Duty is such an established brand that it's hard to beat that out.
Yeah. All right. Adam, you came in with the topic this week. Do you want to take it from here?
Well, it was just an interesting article. Now, this got posted on Reddit recently, but it's apparently a 3-month-old article back in January. Or 3 months. I guess it'd be 4 months now. Math is hard, okay? And it was an article in The Guardian by Sean Monahan that basically just talked about how video games have replaced music as the most important aspect of youth culture, because it took in an estimated $180 billion in 2020, which was more than sports and movies worldwide. I could go into the article, but I mean, it's mostly an opinion piece just talking about like what the industry's done over the years. I think it's just interesting as a whole, and of course, we're not going to take that and put that notch to our belt as gamers and all, being like, we're the biggest game in town now, but I can't say I didn't tell people like that when I was a kid, because my parents didn't freaking understand the genre, and I'm like, I don't think you guys understand where this is going to go. Like, even as a teenager, I knew this is going to be the biggest industry. Because, I mean, there's no experience like gaming. There really isn't. There's a reason why video games can't, or generally speaking, don't become good movies, because you can't do what video games can do in 2 hours.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a very in-depth kind of medium in the sense that, like, yeah, if you think about it, like, even the best movie, you only have 20, you have like what, 2, maybe 3 hours to kind of convey a deep story, whereas a video game you can have 50 hours if you need to.
You don't even need, even if you talk 2 to 3 hours at the same pace. Like, you could literally take a game that's 3 hours long and a movie that's 3 hours long, and the game would still be better just because the game lets you dictate it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, too. A movie chooses the angles you get to see. It chooses the dialogue you get to hear. You, as a gamer, get to choose every single thing that you interact with. You can choose to ignore NPCs. You can choose to do a fight in a specific way that's different to what the game probably even wants you to do. I mean, that's what you see with speedrunners, where they go into, like, say, Super Mario World and play it without ever eating a mushroom, like stuff like that. Yeah. You get to choose exactly what you do, and that's why games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age did so well, or all these kind of games where it lets you choose where you go. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitate to those now, because they offer not only experiences that are way more enthralling, I think, because it's part of you, but it's also a customized movie for you. It's just a much longer customizable movie that you get to choose. And that's why it's so much easier for people to get into, because it's not just it being made for you and you just having to sit there and watch what they've made. It's you literally get to be the movie.
Yeah. I think it is surprising, though. Like, I mean, not to say like that video games have become as big as they have, but the way that it's kind of taken over pop culture, to me, is kind of surprising. I mean, I think back when, I was in high school and stuff, and like if you had said, in grade 9, like, hey, video games are going to be so mainstream that you're going to see people just wearing like video game shirts in, you know, at the mall or whatever. I mean, we don't see anybody at the mall right now, but like to see the main, like how mainstream everything would get. And like you see people with, you know, video game tattoos and shirts and like all this, you know, stuff with icons and logos from game companies and stuff. It's fascinating that it has taken over the way it has. Like, I mean, I think I see now more video game shirts than I see band t-shirts. And then I remember when I was in high school, like band t-shirts were the thing that like everyone was wearing to kind of identify what genre.
Even though they'd never listened to the band, which is, and now it's the same thing where you look at people like wearing Call of Duty shirts and you're sitting there being like, have you played that game actually?
Yeah, like
you wonder sometimes. Now I'm at that point too, because like not too long ago, there was a guy that was like a temporary worker at my workplace, and he had a Rush T-shirt on. I'm like, oh, what's your favorite album? And he's like, he said like a Nirvana record or something. I'm like, no, Rush. He's like, oh, I've never listened to him. I'm like, the fuck you wearing it for?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like I've had that come up sometimes too, where I see someone like, you know, wearing like an Assassin's Creed shirt or something like that, and I'm like, oh man, like one. Like, you know, what one's your like? Who's your favorite Assassin's Creed character? And I'm like, and I'm not trying to take it away. Like, it's just I have to remember to dial it back. It's like not everyone is at the same level when it comes
I don't know.
to video games.
I'm gonna call. Well, okay, if you're talking like going full on nerd, but like I know people that have been like, I don't like it when people like try to comment on what I'm wearing. I'm like, dude, you're wearing a fan piece of material. Like it's fan material.
You are throwing this out to the people, being like, hey, this is a way for us to connect. And I think it's a really cool thing.
I'm a big wrestling fan. If I see anybody with a Bullet Club t-shirt, I expect them to too sweet me, or else I'm going to be fucking pissed. Like, that is the rule. You fucking too sweet me. And the same goes for if I walk around with a Maiden shirt, I would be honored for people to ask me, what's your favorite fucking Maiden record? You know?
Well, what is it? I'll bite. What's your favorite Maiden record?
I'm going to be really bad here, and it's Brave New World, which is a newer Iron Maiden record, and most people
Brave
probably
New
don't
World
know.
is not that bad. Like I think,
but I know, but everybody's like, oh, it's got to be Peace of Mind or Number of the Beast. I'm like, guys, I just really like, you know, better sound. I'm kind of
Brave New World is a good one. Yeah, Power Slave is pretty good too. And then, yeah, I'd say Peace of Mind. Because, I mean, I think Peace of Mind is probably the best one, in my opinion.
But, I mean, the same goes for games. Like, if I'm wearing a Final Fantasy t-shirt, like, with just a cute chocobo or a Moogle on it, yeah, you better ask me what if I don't answer what my favorite Final Fantasy game is, I think you should be allowed to punch me. I think you should.
No, I mean, I don't want to, like, be gatekeeping or anything, but I think it's cool to see how it's permeated through. Like, I'm
just saying me. I'm not saying everybody. Just me.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay,
I will say it's very weird. Like, I don't understand people who wear merch that they know it. Like, unless you got it at some like thrift store, but most of the time it's people buying it because it's a brand. You know exactly why. So my expectation would be if you're buying something that you know is a nerd thing. And by the way, like if you're young and you're buying a nerd culture shirt, you know people are going to get fanboy about it. You're young. You know, you're on the internet. You know. So if you're wearing an Iron Man shirt and somebody asks you about what's your favorite MCU movie and you haven't watched one, you deserve what's coming because you know. Like, come on, you know. If you're 65, I'll give it to you. But if you're 16 and you're wearing a Captain America shirt and you've never watched an Avengers movie, I'm gonna call you out. It's a little weird.
I mean, I don't know why someone would do that. I think generally people know like what they're getting into.
Well, but that's why I would expect a 16-year-old that used to wear Nirvana t-shirts back in the 90s. It's kind of weird if you'd never listened to a Nirvana record. So that's the brand thing that I always find just weird.
Well, I think for me it's interesting to see how it's permeated in that like it's not lame anymore to kind of be like, yeah, I stayed at home and I played video games all day. Like, you know, once upon a time that would be like kind of weird and lame, but now it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of accepted and that's kind of cool.
Well, all I would ask is that you wear gear that matches that, because if I suddenly want a fanboy in front of you and you've never played the games before, it hurts my feelings a lot. That's all.
I did not realize this was such a triggering topic for you.
It's gaming. Everything's triggering to me.
Yeah, no, I think it's cool. Like I remember like it was a very small group in high school that was into gaming, or at least open about it. Like it was one of those things, like I'm sure more people played than I knew. Like it was starting to become mainstream, but it was still kind of like a small circle that did it. And I think it's interesting that the hobby is proliferating more, with younger people. And I think it is. You do see it that people resonate more with games now than they do with, movies or music. Like, especially music. I feel like most kids now aren't huge into that as much as they are into other things.
And I'm going to be completely honest too. I think that a large part of that is because music is so overproduced now. Like it's shoved down our throats too. So like there's this expectation of what you're supposed to listen to. So I find that like, and especially with Spotify, there's so much now that it's really hard to have like those groups. There's so many smaller niches now. Mm-hmm. So it's so easy to get lost. You're either whatever's on the radio or you're completely out of sight because you're in your own weird little bubbles right now. Whereas with gaming, it hasn't hit that point yet where there's most gaming communities right now are aware when like the next big PS5 game comes out. Mm-hmm. Whereas like when the next big rock record comes out right now, a lot of people just they don't even know it exists. Like right now, there's a lot of people that don't even know that Greta Van Fleet is a thing, and Greta Van Fleet is like the closest thing to like the big rock band right now.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to get stuff passed by today in music or even in film, like in most cases, but most of the stuff that's unmissable is pop culture related too, which is really hard to escape because it's nerdy. So
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just interesting how nerdism has taken over pop culture. So
yeah, and there was a point that you were talking earlier about how like you didn't know it was going to be this big. I knew a long time ago that it was going to be a big deal. As soon as Xbox got first announced, and I saw The Rock with Bill Gates, I knew. At that point, I knew it was never gonna get it was gonna get bigger from then on, because if you get at the time the biggest or one of the biggest pop culture stars at that point in The Rock.
No, he wasn't that big back in because this is what early 2000s. He wasn't that big.
He was that close. Like it was that close.
I don't think he was that big. Like he was big in wrestling. I'll give you that, but his acting career was pretty tiny.
I think people really underestimate what wrestling actually kickstarts.
Oh, no, and I'm not trying to take it away from that, but I'm just saying when he's advertising that, it's not, he wasn't the pop culture icon.
But at the time, yeah, maybe not. But even as a kid, because I recognized how big wrestling figures do, because I mean, mm-hmm. Hulk Hogan is literally like a household name.
Oh yeah.
Macho Man Randy Savage was you would never, as a kid, you could never go by more than 15 minutes without seeing Macho Man on the screen because of Slim Jim commercials.
Yep. So yeah, you're right. Like Stone Cold Steve Austin and everything. Yeah.
So when The Rock was there with Xbox and it was attached to gaming, even though I'm pretty sure The Rock probably didn't really want to be there, it was just paycheck.
Oh yeah.
Maybe he did want to be there, but either way, as soon as I saw him there as a kid, my brain went, okay, gaming is definitely hitting the mainstream now, and it's going to only get bigger from here. And when it obviously became what it is now, it was just validated. Now I didn't go out there and say to all my friends, oh yeah, gaming is going to be the biggest thing ever. I didn't think it would be bigger than the NFL, but I knew it was definitely going to start becoming the big entertainment buzz. It wasn't going to be the one underneath all of the other stuff. Because even as a kid, you could see music starting, especially once the digital age came, you could see music start to fizzle out. It's not fizzle out, but reduce its impact.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. I've always had the feeling that games were going to get better, but then again, that also could just have partly to do that I attached every bit of my human being to that fucking industry. So
yeah, you were just invested in you needed it to be that big.
I always would assume that we get better, because if it didn't, I'd be fucked.
Yeah. All right, let's leave it at that. Adam, yeah, I think that we're gonna wrap it up the show there. Is there anything you wanted to kind of get out, talk about? Any last closing thoughts?
Gaming is awesome, and that's the bottom line, because I said so. That's all I got.
Yeah, there we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for episode 17 of the PixelPlay Podcast. If this was your first time, I hope it was good for you. If you're one of our regulars, thank you so much for sticking around with us. We really appreciate it. We ask if you've enjoyed the show, please rate us, comment. Let us know what you think. Where do you kind of think Halo Infinite is going to land in terms of when it releases? Do you think it's going to do well? Do you think it's going to struggle? Let us know what you think. Yeah, and if you want, share, subscribe, do all those typical things. If you want to get in touch with us, we are on Twitter at PixelPlayCast. We can find us PixelPlayCast on Anchor, Spotify, wherever. And if you want to be part of the show, send us an email. We would love to have it on the air. You can email us at pixelplaypodcast@gmail.com. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye for now.